The battle over banned books in schools continues to make headlines. This is Common Sense Explains. Over the past couple of years, there has been a dramatic increase in the number of books being challenged or banned in schools across the country. While there's a long history of book banning and censorship in the US, it's been especially high recently. Let's talk to Regan McMahon, Common Sense Media's senior editor and head of books. Hi, Regan.
Hello, Anna.
You have been at Common Sense for over a decade. You have reviewed hundreds of books. What do you think makes a really good book for kids?
Great characters, a compelling plot, a great setting is a big draw too, especially in fantasy and historical fiction. And a lot of kids are looking for characters that they can relate to. So that's a big draw too.
So I mentioned that you and your team review hundreds of books every year. How exactly does your team determine a book's age appropriateness?
We have a special rubric that we use when we do our book reviews, and it's based on child development principles. So a lot of the age ratings relate to what can a kid handle at this age. There's a big difference between a second grader and a fourth grader, for example, or a 6-year-old and a 10-year-old. And anyway, we keep those things in mind as we evaluate the piece of literature in front of us.
So there's a lot of different topics that have been targets of censorship throughout history. Certain discussion of maybe religion in the 1700s was banned. Books containing anti-slavery sentiment in the 1800s were burned. What are the topics being targeted today for book banning?
The things I see are books that deal with racism, the history of race in the United States, sexual identity, gender identity, offensive language, and actual sex scenes.
Why do you think books, more than other kinds of media, are often in the crosshairs of being banned?
Well, I think a big factor is because books are assigned in school and available at school. And parents have certain ideas about what topics they want or don't want their kids exposed to, or at what age they want the kid exposed to that. So I think, anytime you have they think about this idea of an adult is giving my kid this book, and it takes control out of the hands of the parents. So that's what's inciting some people.
So with the recent escalation of books being removed from a lot of school libraries across the country, a lot have been left wondering if that violates the rights of students. So what exactly does the law say? Let me explain. 40 years ago, the Supreme Court finally addressed censorship. The case involved a group of students who sued a New York school board for removing books they found to be anti-American, anti-Christian, anti-Semitic, and just plain filthy. The 5 teenage students claimed removing the books, which included Slaughterhouse-5, The Naked Ape, and Down These Mean Streets, violated their First Amendment rights. The court ruled that local school boards may not remove books from school libraries simply because they dislike the ideas contained in those books, and concluded that it was in fact a First Amendment violation. However, the decision was not as decisive as it could have been. The lack of a clear and uniform decision from the Supreme Court left the field wide open for the current wave of book banning attempts. So Regan, that decision, or non-decision rather, from the Supreme Court pretty much led a lot of educators across the country to find their own ways to celebrate the freedom to read. And so in the 1980s, Banned Books Week was born. What do you think kids gain by reading a book that is being challenged?
Well, banned books often deal with subjects that are realistic and timely and topical. So these are things that are on kids' minds, things that kids are seeing in their lives, questions that they're struggling with. And because they're tough and edgy questions, they have that appeal, and also they have value. And one of the things that you can do through literature is you can walk in somebody else's shoes. So if you're struggling and wondering about, well, what's the deal with sexual identity? What's the deal with gender? What's the deal with race? And then you can see it, you can read a book, and the characters in that book are doing things. I mean, one of the book that's been banned before is a book called The Outsiders that has these rebel teens. And even though it seems really dated now, it's kids, year after year, kids get turned on to reading by reading that book, because they can just really dig into a book about rebel teens. Another book that's a classic is Catcher in the Rye. Again, a rebellious teen, and with all these, for decades, teenagers have been turned on to reading from that book.
Which brings me to the point that a lot of the banned books that you mentioned were banned decades ago, but now today they are required reading in some schools. So do you think that the books that are being challenged today will maybe one day be required reading or read much more widely than they are now?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, these. I feel like the children's literature is just in the forefront of tackling these complex issues. Um, they Things that weren't written about before are being written about, and they're being valuable. They are valuable to kids in grade school, middle school, and high school now. And I think that if they have indelible characters and indelible issues or eternal issues, like things about fitting in and bullying and things that kids go through, I think that they have the potential to be very lasting. There's a book called The New Kid, which was a graphic novel that came out a couple of years ago and won the Newbery Award, and it deals with a black kid going into a white school, and you know, it's just a great piece of literature, and I think that could be a classic.
I mean, you already mentioned a couple, including that one, but if you had to choose a banned book, either that it was banned in the past or it's currently being challenged, that you think every student should read, which book is that?
The frequently banned book that I always think about is To Kill a Mockingbird. It's a great piece of literature. It has some issues, but it deals with justice and racism and America's past, and it just has really compelling, indelible characters. You'll never forget these characters. So it has a lot going for it. And the things that seem like, well, you could debate about them, that debate has been going on since the book came out. It's a meaty book to sink your teeth into.
And I think that's what's important, right? Is finding books that we can have conversations about in the classroom and at home. Thanks so much, Regan, for walking us through all that. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. You can find the link to a list of the banned books that Common Sense Media recommends in our episode description. Until next time.